All right, so a couple of things. First off, the homework answers are here. So in this case, the homework answers for yesterday's homework questions are here. So make sure you check on this. Yesterday, I also got an email from someone after school, mind you, was like, "Oh, can you please give us access to the crossword puzzle?" So unfortunately, I didn't know that the crossword puzzle answer, you guys didn't have access to it. So my assumption is that no one have checked on their answers of the crossword puzzle until yesterday. So yesterday after school. So in this case, please do the crossword puzzle and check your answer. Okay? Because it is very important. Also, the link to yesterday's lesson video is here. So if you haven't watched it yet, because you were away, you can watch it there. Today, we are only going to be focusing on 8.3 today, which is patterns of evolution. Tomorrow, it's the same package, it's the same handout package, but we're only going to focus on the first half. Tomorrow, we'll be dealing with the macro evolution, which is 8.5 tomorrow, okay? And as you can see, I've started putting some Chapter 7 review questions from the textbook. Okay, so you have time to do those questions and do review. Okay. All right. So now just a quick recap. So last week we talked about natural selection. We talked about different types of selection processes. Okay. We talk about different types of sexual selection. We also talk about genetic drift and bottleneck and founder's effect. Yesterday, we talked about speciation. Basically, how does nature, after a certain reproductive isolation, how does these reproductive isolation form different types of species? We're really talking about the mechanism of it. So today we're going to be talking about the patterns. Based on these mechanisms, what do we see? What kind of evolution do we see? And we're trying to make sense of it. Okay? We're trying to make sense of it. And basically, there are 3 different patterns of evolution that we're going to be talking about today. So let's get going. So if you look at the handout here, and just a quick skim, you have divergent evolution, you have convergent evolution, and you have something called coevolution. Coevolution. Okay, so these are the 3 main patterns of evolution that we're going to be talking about today. And in some ways, if we want to think of these 3 patterns, so you have divergent evolution. You can get a blank piece of paper, or you can just use the back. Either or is fine. Divergent evolution, convergent evolution. I'm just going to put evolution. In some ways, for those of you who make notes, remember in the earlier classes, if this course I taught you guys how to make notes. One of the things you're making notes is like use shorthand that is meaningful to you. So evolution, evo would be a good one. Okay. And co-evolution. Okay, co-evolution. So in some ways, divergent evolution, convergent evolution, co-evolution. I would use this diagram to distinguish these things. So you have divergent evolution will have common ancestors, and you diverge into different traits. Okay, different traits. Okay, diverge into different traits. Maybe I shouldn't draw so many arrows now. Put a word after each one of them. Okay, so you divergent evolution. You have common ancestors evolving into different traits, but all these are homologous structures. Okay, they are also homologous structures. They are similar structures, but the structures are different. Okay. So divergent. Did you guys talk about divergent lenses or divergent mirrors, curved mirrors in grade 10? Grade 10, yeah. So divergent, you scatter or spread out. Converges, you converge everything together. So divergent evolution. So if we look here, evolution of many species from a single common ancestor. Now, so in this case, you have many different species, one single common ancestors. But if you look here, the homologous structure within these 5 different species would suggest that they were common ancestors. Yes, we saw homologous structures last week because that was part of the chapter 7 things. So the idea is that you have a single species placed under 2 different sets of selective pressure. So maybe the common ancestors would be, let's just say, 2 different sets of selective pressure. Maybe some of them will be in an area where it's better for you to be able to catch birds, or you'd be able to fly versus to be able to swim. That would be an example. Okay. So as the evolution can evolve, as the species differ and evolve, you will get less competition between the 2 new species. So the one that evolved to developing flight will have less competition for those who has developed the ability to swim. Okay? So you have less of that interspecies competition. So divergent evolution, this is why I said common ancestors evolved slightly different traits in slightly different species. Okay? Any questions so far? Now, adaptive radiation here, it's a type of divergent evolution. It's a type of divergent evolution. Okay? So let me just put it in here. This is almost like a mind map, but not really well done mind map, let's just say. Adaptive radiation. It'll be a type of, okay? So adaptive radiation, this will be a type of divergent evolution. It will be a type of divergent evolution. Now, how does it differ? Is this. It's relatively fast. And the new species they're different species, but they're very closely related. Okay? Very closely related. So, an example of adaptive radiation will be Darwin's finches. Okay, Darwin's finches, which we did look at in chapter 7. So a lot of this unit, there's a lot of connection between chapter 7 and chapter 8. So Darwin's finches. Now, before we look into this diagram too much longer, Darwin's finches. Remember, Galapagos Island is a number of islands, 5 to 7 islands that are very close to each other. Different islands have very different habitats. So some of them will have mostly forests, and some of them you actually don't have that many trees. Very dry desert. So in this case, the different finches that settled and occupied different islands, they will have to evolve. They will have to adapt to the different selective pressure. Okay, they'll have to adapt to this different selective pressure. So some of them will be more insect-eating species, okay, and spend most of its time on trees. And some of them are more for eating seeds that are on the ground. Okay, so again, it depends on what are the different seeds that they eat. Then it develops even more. Okay? So this would be an example of adaptive radiation because it's a relatively short time, and we're not talking about thousands and millions of years. And at the same time, they are still finches. They're still finches, different finches, but they're still finches. Okay. Questions so far? So in this case, adaptive radiation, how it differs is that it is faster and closer related species. Faster and closer related species. Okay? Whereas in divergent evolution, you get to see things like humans, bats, and whales, and horses. They're very different species. Are we good so far? So divergent evolution's common ancestors diverge into different species and different traits because of selective pressure, but there's a lot of homologous structure. Now, convergent evolution, we are talking about, now converge means coming together, right? So you are really talking about, similar traits, species that have similar traits, but coming from different, let's just say, background, okay? Coming from different species. Okay. So you have different species because they face similar pressure or environment. They develop similar traits. Okay. Due to similar environment. Okay, due to similar environments. Now, I don't really like the first example that is in our slide where they talk about two different flightless birds. I do like this one better? Do you like this example better? So if you look here, two different plants. One is cacti from South America, and this one euphorbia, I guess, from South Africa. Two different continents. They might be related together, like with each other once upon a time, and we're talking about long time ago. But in this case, we can almost pretty much say they come from very different species. Because they have similar environments. Okay, they're both living in very hot and dry environments. So in this case, they develop similar traits. One of them is thick green stems, so that they can do photosynthesis, but they don't deal with the water loss so much. Okay? You don't have that much water loss due to leaves. They both have spikes or protective spines, so predators won't be able to eat them that easily. Okay, that's a way for them to protect themselves. But how did both species evolve to have this similar trait? They done it by different ways. Okay, cacti, their leaves slowly evolve into spikes, and this here, euphorbia, it's from their stem tissues growing out into spikes. So in this case, they do it differently. Think of it as almost like a math question, but you have two different people solve it with a different method. Okay, you could do for like a function for a simple function question, one person might decide to solve it by graphing, the other person try to solve it by using algebra. Two different methods to solve a similar problem. Think of it that way. Okay, good. Another example, dolphins and sharks. Okay, they are very not related species. Shark is a cartilage fish, and dolphin is a mammal. Okay, they are not really that related. However, they both live in the ocean. They do need to be able to swim fast so that they can actually catch their prey. So they both develop very streamlined bodies. Okay, However, how they do it is slightly different. Okay, sharks move their tails side to side. Dolphins swim by tails moving up and down. So again, different method to solve the same problem. Okay, but coming from different approach. So same thing here. They have similar traits because similar environment, but coming from a different approach, from different ancestors too. You guys good? Now, last but not least, we're talking about co-evolution. So in this case, you're really talking about two species evolving closer and closer together. Think of intertwining almost. Okay? And it can happen whether it's a one-sided relationship, okay, parasitism, or herbivory. Or you can talk about it's a mutualistic, so both sides are benefiting relationship. Okay. So in this case, coevolution. So in this case here, what's the purpose for plants developing seeds? What's the main purpose for plants developing seeds? Yes. Yeah, reproduction. Plants really don't want their seeds to get eaten, right? So in this case, let's just say if there are certain animals or birds eating this particular plant's seeds, they really want to not want that to happen. So some plants would develop and evolve protective shells to protect their seeds, like coconuts. Or I don't know. I don't think this is coconut. I think this is, not sure what this is. And in this case, let's just say this little guy here. So in this case, some seed-eating mammals would develop or evolve more powerful jaws and teeth specifically to chew through those shells. Okay, so in this case, this species is being benefit from it, and this is being harmed by it. Okay, technically it's herbivory. Okay, herbivores. But in this case, again, this mammal developed powerful and teeth that is specific for the shells, and so later on, the plants might have harder and harder shells, and this might evolve more specialized mechanism to break through that shell. So maybe eventually, after a while, this mammal might not, their mouth and jaws might not really fit to break through other seeds and other shells. They become very dependent on this. Does it make sense? So so coevolution, you're talking about two species but evolving closer and closer together. So this is an example of one that is harming the other. But you also have one that both benefit from each other. Both benefit from each other. Okay. So in this case, the orchid here have completely dependent on this moth hawk to pollinate their flowers for evolution, for reproduction. So in this case, now the orchid, because the moth wants to get the nectar from it, so in this case, the orchid also evolved very, very long spires, so that in this case, it will contain the nectar for the moth hawk to have it. The moth will get the nectar from the food. So in this case, they both evolve the same way. Orchid evolved to have longer and longer spires, which contain the nectar. Moth will have longer and longer, or not longer and longer, the tongue length that's just right to reach to the bottom of the spurs. Okay. So in this case, this is an example of a mutualistic, but both evolve more and more closer and codependent to each other. Any questions to that? Okay, so in this case, okay, good, it's using my microphone. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you guys to do the following. Read the textbook on 8.3. Make any notes that I didn't really talk about in class. Okay, just add anything in there. And there are these questions 1, 3, 4, and 5. And I also have some review questions for you to do from the textbook for chapter 7. Start doing the review questions, okay? So that is about it. Any questions? No? All right.